Thank you for being here. My name's Andrew Finstuen. I'm the Dean of the Honors College, and I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Advancing American Values, which sponsors Idaho Listens or helps put on Idaho Listens. Today, April 20th, 2023, by order of the governor, is Idaho Listens Day. So yesterday, Brad Littleside gave this proclamation marking April 20th, 2023 is Idaho Listens Day. So throughout the state of Idaho, Idaho listens. And that's what you're here to listen to here in a moment. And before I do a few logistical announcements, we have some introduction remarks from the president of Boise State, Dr. Marlene Tromp, who will then also introduce a video. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Marlene Tromp, the president of Boise State University, to the podium.
Thank you, Andrew. I want to say a special word about Andrew Finstuen's leadership, but I'll do so after I thank you for inviting us into your community. I'm so excited to be here today. This program is exceptionally important to me. We were so moved when, after a series of conversations that I had with Greg Carr about our dismay that we saw people talking past each other, good people, committed people, caring people who were talking past each other and couldn't hear each other. And we were spending time on the phone saying, what can we do to help people see each other again as human beings, to recognize each other's value, even if they continue to disagree? And due to Greg's generous support, our Institute for Advancing American Values, which focuses on asking the question, what do you value and why? What makes something an American value? How do we support American values? As a part of that institute, Greg generously funded support for this program, Idaho Listens, based on scholarship that Greg and I read together, and then a series of conversations he had with Andrew Finstuen, who is not only the inaugural director of the Institute for Advancing American Values, but also the dean of our Honors College. What this program does is it invites you to listen and learn from a variety of perspectives and experiences. And if you haven't seen it yet, Idaho Public Television created a beautiful documentary of our program from Boise, and we've also begun to do this program with our students. In this program, we feature speakers who come from a wide array of backgrounds and who have the courage to come before you and answer the question, what do you value and why? This assignment is one that most people have to really take some time to reflect upon. And it touches the deepest part of who we are, what makes us who we are, what makes us who we are in our communities. And for me, this is a dream come true. And I think it's intimately tied to what the mission of a university is, which is to bring people together, to learn to identify what they think and why, to help them be challenged and to explore, but to use that as a way to foster their own strong beliefs. Many people work together to make this program a reality. We have the leadership of Dean Finstuen and also our faculty fellows and student fellows in the program. So we had faculty and students who applied to be a part of this project and to work in an ongoing fashion about bringing people together to hear one another and engage in dialogue. But also, of course, with the generous support and partnership of Greg Carr. So today, I'm very pleased, since Greg can't be with us in person, to offer you a video message from my friend and yours, Greg Carr.
Hi, everybody. I'm enthused for the launch of Idaho Listens. And thank you, Boise State University. Today I'm going to talk about my hero, my mentor, My role model, my mom, Betty Olson Carr. My mother turned 100 on August 2nd, 2022. Her family, her parents came to Idaho in 1910. Got a little farm near Kimberly. She grew up there. So we're going on 110 years now. Our family loving this state. We like Idaho, we like the people. Now I think my mother embodies the spirit of Idaho Listens. She has what we would all call traditional values: hard work, integrity, help a neighbor, sacrifice for a bigger cause. But on top of that, my mother has curiosity. She loves to learn. She's always reading. She likes to meet new people. She likes conversation. We had all kinds of different folks in our neighborhood, up and down South Holmes Road in Idaho Falls. Different people. My mom liked all of them. She was friends with all of them. My mother didn't believe that you had to agree with someone on every single political point or philosophical idea or lifestyle in order to be their friend, in order to like them. In fact, she took it a step further. If she was in a room of people and somebody said something that wasn't entirely positive about somebody else, she would always say, well, but you know, so-and-so has this good quality. Now, isn't that really the highest aspiration for being a human being, that we can find kindness and compassion for everyone? Now, our neighborhood was vibrant because we had all these different ideas. And why is that a good thing? Why would it be a good thing for Idaho to have an entire mix of people with different views and notions? Well, it means we have that many more solutions available to us as we face a challenge. The United States of America has been the most innovative nation on earth, decade after decade after decade. And why is that? Because we are a collection of people from the entire world that gathered in our country, all of them bringing their different ideas, their different skills, their different solutions to problems, their languages. It's a mashup of creativity that leads to invention, that leads to resilience. There's an example that I enjoy thinking about on the benefits of diversity. And it's the English language itself. People say that English has more than 1 million words in it. Probably more than any other language on earth. How did that happen? Well, the people who spoke English were exploring the whole world. They were curious. They were learning. They were gathering ideas. They were incorporating words, new ways to think about things. I'll use an example. My mom, Betty, is pretty. Now, how many different words can I find in the English language to express the concept of pretty? Well, there'd be hundreds. Now, pretty itself is actually a word that came from Dutch into Middle English many centuries ago. But how else can we describe Betty? She's gorgeous, she's lovely, she's pleasing, she's alluring, she's charming, she's dazzling, she's elegant, she's exquisite, stunning, for sure. She's splendid, she's resplendent, she's angelic, for sure. She's radiant. My mom is pulchritudinous. Okay, I don't really use the word pulchritudinous in my everyday life, but it's from Latin, and it actually means the most beautiful. All right? So what does this mean that we have such a huge vocabulary in English? It means that when we want to express an idea, we can do so with more precision, with more refinement, with more nuance. It's a blessing. So Idaho listens. We're going to hear from a dozen different people today. I hope they all have vastly different stories to tell. How boring would it be if they all said the same thing and thought the exact same thought? Okay? Everybody's going to be sound asleep in the audience. How boring would my neighborhood have been where I grew up if everybody robotically was repeating the same sentences? What chance would I have had to learn, to expand my mind, to expand my awareness, to imagine what it might be like to be a different human being? Well, I think the evidence is there that my mom's choice of lifestyle and kindness must be a healthy way to live. Because not only did she cross 100, on her 100th birthday, she played pickleball. So let's launch Idaho Listens today. Let's get to know each other. And beyond today, let's keep doing it. And build a fabric of friendship in our state.
Well, and of course, for some of you know, some of you don't know that Betty Carr passed away last year. I think we should all acknowledge, honor her memory, honor Greg's message with a round of applause before we get into our silence. So welcome to our second experiment with Idaho Listens. We will shortly hear from 9 speakers. We had 12 at the first one. And we are asking for silent listening. The program outlines this goal. And in a way, you're familiar with this convention. Please hold your applause until all have been recognized. Still, there is a novel quality to the spirit of Idaho Listens. And one of Greg Carr's comments to me on some of our discussions around the notion of Idaho Listens, he said something I'll never forget, and I'm going to mention it every time we talk about Idaho Listens. And that is, we're looking for an environment of reverent listening. And so we've outlined in your program, you can see here on the inside of the program, how we would like to ensure that uninterrupted listening. We request that you all be silent as you listen, refraining from clapping and sounds of agreement or disagreement. To be respectful as you all listen, respecting the right to free expression. To be curious as you listen, searching for opportunities for learning and understanding. And to be gracious as you listen. Pursuing listening as an act of kindness and generosity to a fellow human. So yes, we are here to listen and to do so silently. But we are not going to stop a smile or a nod or a tear. But as much as possible, please do listen without sound and do so reverently, whether in agreement or disagreement with what's being said. That is the respect that reverence promises. We also promise conversation will ensue over dinner. We have a wonderful dinner that follows our program this evening. The program also notes the courage of our speakers. They face an audience who is not supposed to react while they share their important aspects and stories of their lives and values. That is a daunting task. So, let's give them a warm welcome, a big round of applause before we do the silence. Okay, I've just got a few announcements and some words of thanks, and then we'll get to our speakers. The program also outlines the order of the speakers. We have a first set seated over here to my right that will be followed by a break. So once the last speaker of this group goes, Laura, then I'll come up, we'll announce the break, we'll have 5 or 10 minutes for folks to have a minute to grab some more refreshment, use the restrooms, or what have you. Then I'll call you back into your seats, and again, we'll resume our silent listening for the second round of speakers, and dinner will follow. And it will be served family style. That was also Greg's intention for these events, to ensure that we have a family style atmosphere. What that does is it forces all of you to talk and listen to one another as, for example, you pass the Brussels sprouts or whatever it is that we're serving this evening. So, words of thanks. I have to thank Jeff Carr from the Museum of Idaho, and you see special thanks in the program. Because as we started to move to Idaho Falls as our second installment, I called Jeff to ask about venues, to ask about potential speakers, to ask about the community, and he's been gracious in his responses to me, and I so appreciate it, Jeff. Thank you very much. As we sought to ensure balance among our speakers, we've often had the advice, the sage advice of some members of Senator Crapo's team. Tonight we have John Haney, Senator Crapo's Chief of Staff, who's sitting here, and also another member of Crapo's team, Catherine Hitch, somewhere in the audience. There she is. Really appreciate the work that they've done with us since the beginning. John and his staff and team, at the behest of Senator Crapo, have been involved in these conversations from the get-go. So thanks so much for your support. Dr. Tromp mentioned our faculty fellows, 2 of whom are here tonight, and our student fellows. We have 3 or 4 here. They at least wave to us so people know there's some faculty and students spread around the room from Boise State who help us with this project. Idaho Public Television is filming this event this evening. As Dr. Tromp mentioned, they produced a documentary that aired last month. It's fantastic. And we appreciate their filming of this event as we continue this project together. Heather Calkins is somewhere. She works out of Boise State, and she puts on these events, and we couldn't do it without her, and I'm so thankful for her help and support. And of course, Dr. Tromp, a great supporter of this work from the beginning. And Greg and she, as she discussed, had this concept back and forth over email and phone calls more than 2 years ago, and she mobilized several of us on campus, including me, to make this happen. And so here we are, through Greg's inspiration, where he challenges us to continue Idaho Listens across the state. That's why we're here in Idaho Falls. In the fall, we'll go up to Coeur d'Alene. We need to hear more voices from different regions around the great state of Idaho. But we're pleased to be here. I will shortly bring up Jeanette Duarte to start us off. There are no formal introductions or biographies of the speakers. We wanted them to speak for themselves. So after I bring up Jeanette, the other speakers will simply follow as they are listed in your program. And then, as I mentioned after the break, I'll gather everyone's attention and we'll start with Park Price. And then again, others will follow without biographies, without introductions. And when Michelle closes our program, I will return to the podium to close out the evening. Jeanette, please take the stage and let the listening begin.
As a 15-year-old, I would look at myself in the mirror and think, why are you here? I would look at my face and my hands and and things around me and say, am I really alive? To this day, I don't understand why I would do this, but I know I hated to have those thoughts. It was a voice that I would hear once again in my life, once at the Shoshone Falls, as we saw in the video, that said, jump. Another time, do it. Nobody will know. It's a voice that it's not coming from a good place. I assumed they were suicidal thoughts because the question was in my mind and it said, why are you here? With a macabre tone. Almost like, why are you living? Why are you here in the present? I don't think they were suicidal because I wanted to live. I wanted to be alive, but they made me uncomfortable. I would snap out of it by moving away from the mirror. I'm not really sure when they stopped, but eventually they did. But now I wonder if those episodes happened because it was a particularly challenging time as a young person, like many other teenagers would have. My parents were having problems in their marriage and they would later divorce. My brother's friend, who was often at our house after school, committed suicide. Or maybe it was because I was in 10th grade. I was attending my 7th school in 3 different cities in 2 different countries, and it was hard for me to make connections. Maybe I was lonely. We moved around quite a bit. Fast forward to my 30s, and I worked at a local middle school, and that year we had a particularly difficult group of students. I would stand in the halls in my classroom and ask myself, this time verbalizing, why am I here? Like, why am I putting myself through these situations on a daily basis? I would share my struggles with my principal and ask, am I setting the bar too high? Are my expectations too high? And he'd say, nope, you're fine where they're at. About the same time, my church was doing a small group book study on Rick Warren's The Purpose-Driven Life. This book is written from a Christian perspective, and it explains 5 purposes for a believer of God and a follower of Christ. They are worship. I can do that. Unselfish fellowship. Okay. Spiritual maturity. Serving others. That's easy. And one's mission. Now, I'm not saying that I struggle with 4 of those 5 purposes, but serving others certainly spoke to me, and it clicked, it made sense. It's not about us, it's about others. Whenever I would become frustrated with the kids, I would just remind myself that I had a purpose. I didn't know what it was, but I definitely had a purpose. And I remember walking down the halls and just telling my principal as we passed, I have a purpose. I don't know what it is, but I have one. And pretty soon, my attitude began to change. I wanted to find out what it was. At that time, I worked with students who were English learners, and I was an English learner. Maybe my purpose was not just to do the job that I was hired to do, but to do a little more. Advocate for the students that I get to serve. Be a voice for the voiceless. I'm no Martin Luther King. I'm no Malala. I certainly don't want to get shot in my face. I don't want to get beaten, arrested, or assassinated. I don't have a global audience. The weight. I knew what it was like to be taken from your country, from your friends, from your family, from your language, from your culture, by adults who bring you to a different country because they believe it's a better and a safer place. Not everybody understands that perspective. They're not all here to take your jobs. Okay, so my purpose is not at a global level, but here, right here where I stand. About 7 years ago, a fellow divorcee and we began a divorce recovery group at our church. This happened after my second divorce. I definitely didn't handle my first divorce right, and I knew I had to do things differently the second time around. So we have since run about 12 divorce care groups, and we walk alongside people who are struggling through divorce and separation. Now, who better to walk along than somebody who's walked that path and has made it to the other side-ish. Now, I'm not saying I'm a saint or that I'm a Mother Teresa because I do these things for my fellow man, but I make mistakes every day. I am somebody who lives with anxiety and depression. I have a body that could not hold life, so the one child I have is a miracle. I have diabetes. I am neurodivergent, and so I'm not everybody's cup of tea because I annoy the heck out of people. I am imperfectly perfect. No, I am perfectly imperfect. But I have a purpose here, right here. Others have a global purpose, and mine is right here, just within a 10-foot radius. Possibly my purpose on the first day of school is to visit a local high school and talk to the one student I see not eating with friends and eating in the back of the high school because she hasn't made connections. I know what that's like. With students that I teach in my Sunday school, maybe on Mother's Day, I can, instead of saying, give this to your mom, I can say, give it to your mom, your grandma, your aunt, or the adult that's taking care of you. I can do this to be more inclusive and not add additional suffering to the child that I know has lost their mom. My purpose is in the little things that I can do here, right here. Maybe I need to speak to my 15-year-old self again. Girl, why are you here? Reclaim that question. It's not coming from a good place. Make it yours. The question is, why are you here? It's an action. It's what you're doing, it's what you're saying, it's what you're enacting here in the place where you have been blessed to occupy.
I was blown away when I was given the opportunity and asked if I'd like to participate by someone that I think very highly of. I mean, he probably doesn't even know it. Thank you. My name is Chance Disney, and I'm gonna be honest with you. I was really scared to speak today. Not because I had to speak publicly, but because I'm afraid I can't do justice to what I came to speak about. I was worried that someone else could better communicate the urgency and the magnitude of my message. I obviously did choose to come, but please listen to what's in my heart. And forgive me any poorly worded phrases. I am not a philosopher. I'm just a guy. I'm a citizen and a member of our community. I'm a father, a husband. I was widowed at 33. I'm the son of a veteran, and I also had a stepfather who was a veteran, both of which lost their. I lost both of them to PTSD. And I too suffer from PTSD. I joined the Army the summer after 9/11. I've lost a brother as well, and some friends in the military, and I've had many other struggles in my life. I've made plenty of mistakes, but I refuse to give up. I was raised to be a warrior, and I even bartered a part of my soul to be one for our country. I've had a good life. I've tried to be an example to my children. I try to be an example of what to do when life is hard. That we can not only survive, but we can thrive. I sought help for my mental and physical problems resulting from my time in the service, and I still do. I opened my heart and I fell in love again. A wonderful woman found us. She's a fantastic mother to our children. She's a teacher in a local school here and teaches theater. We have a beautiful home, friends, family that we get to regularly spend time with. And I'm here to serve my community again. I'm here to speak about what I'm trying to do in my own home and in our community. That I'm trying to be an example because I care about you and your children. I care about our collective future. I'm here because our children are watching us and they're learning. But we need to talk about what they're learning. To do that, we need to start looking inward. We need to start looking inward instead of constantly fighting everyone around us in the never-ending onslaught of culture wars and purity tests. Am I, being hypocritical? Are we operating in bad faith? Do we accept new ideas and evidence, even when they conflict with things we believe to be true? The American dream was always defined as making a better life for ourselves. By association, our children would benefit and they would have better lives, opportunities, and futures through our choices. Our choices as a community and by association, our nation. Are we making a better future for our children? Are we giving them their best chance at success? Or are we setting them up for failure? Are we leading by example? The news and social media are full to the brim with outrage, and it's flooding into our streets. We see families being torn asunder by the debates that these culture war narratives and the havoc they wreak on our families. We're encouraged to hate the others and to blame them for all of our ails. We're told daily that if we would just vote the right way, we could take action against them and we would have a solution to all of our woes. This isn't the country I almost died for. An ever-escalating conflict in my own country being waged on its citizens by its citizens. Is this making our lives any better? Are we making more money? Do we have more time to spend with our children, our friends, and our family? Are our children going to be able to make more money? Are they going to be more successful? Are they going to have more time with their children? There's so many questions I couldn't even begin to list them all. So many questions. Some of you are looking at me asking, why aren't you asking this one? Let me ask you this. Has vilifying our fellow citizens solved any of our problems? How about in history? Has any other nation risen by finding out which others were actually to blame? I can't think of a single example where that was successful. Not one. We're being lied to. The lie is that all these distractions are the most important issues that we face. That the people who have the power to take action to help us with the problems we face as a community, as a family, as parents, friends, that these issues are the only thing that matter. Never mind all the problems that are in your home. These things keep us distracted. They keep us divided and not united. It's causing us to show our children that extremism is the answer. Our children are learning that the ends justify the means. We're raising a generation of extremists. Someday they will take over the fight in their own right, and we should be very worried about what that will look like. I have been to countries where extremists finally took over, and it never works out the way people think it will. And it definitely doesn't work out for the children. We've lost the differentiation between what is legal and what is moral. You have to ask, am I a part of the solution? Would our parents be proud of what we've become, and would we be proud of our children if they were us? I've had this conversation many times with people, and I've been told I'm raising my children right, and I'm willing to grant them that and just assume that they are. But I have to remind them that they don't live on an island. We used to say that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, we're a society. We're a society that got here through collaboration and cooperation. Every time life got hard, we got help. We worked together to bring about change. Change that made our communities and our country better. It's time we started working together again, to find common ground. Listen with the intent to understand one another, treat each other like we all matter, defend each other, give each other the benefit of the doubt, call out bad faith arguments, and work towards solutions. Pull each other in and build a better, brighter future for our children. Show them by example that we can solve our problems by working together. We have to find a way. The cost of failure is far too high to pay, but we can succeed. Even in those war-torn countries I was in, I have seen people who were enemies from birth bridge the gap because they wanted to find a way to help themselves by helping each other. People who have spent centuries fighting each other. If they can do it, so can we. Our country has done it so many times before. Our communities are capable of it. And I don't need you to stand alone and change the world. It would be my honor to stand by you, to work together, one conversation at a time, for our children and for our future.
It was January 1982 when my family, along with millions of others around the world, watched the news of a horrific and tragic plane crash. Air Florida Flight 90 departed Washington National Airport and within moments of being airborne, crashed into the 14th Street Bridge and plunged into the icy Potomac River. The crash instantly killed 73 of the 79 passengers aboard, leaving only 6 survivors in the frigid water. The devastating event captured all who were watching not just because of the tremendous tragedy, but also because of the extraordinary acts of humanity that continuously unfolded before us. Some of those actions were attributed to an unidentified and injured passenger who became known as the sixth survivor. Chunks of ice and pools of jet fuel surrounded him with 5 others as they waited for rescue. But he was trapped, pinned within the wreckage. When the Park Police helicopter crew flew overhead and dropped life vests and a flotation ball to those below, he passed them on to others. And each time they threw him a lifeline from the helicopter that could have potentially pulled him to safety, he gave it to another. After all 5 of the crash survivors were rescued, the crew came back for him, but at that point, he was gone. This man, known as the mystery hero, was later identified as Arlen D. Williams, a 46-year-old bank examiner from Atlanta. He was the only victim that died that day from drowning. This act of compassion on behalf of strangers rippled through the heart of our nation. A Time magazine article captured the effects of Williams' ultimate sacrifice in this way. If the man in the water gave a lifeline to the people gasping for survival, he was likewise giving a lifeline to those who observed him. I was 12 years old when I watched this tragic and heroic story. It occurred in the same month and in the same year that my father, at the age of 44, was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor. I had 10 siblings that ranged in age from 2 to 19 years old. I had such limited life experience at that point that I could not and did not comprehend the magnitude of a terminal diagnosis and the impact it would have on him, my mom, and all my siblings. However, I was old enough to be an observer of how a life-altering circumstance can bring out the parts of a person that has been developing for years before a tragedy. When confronted with our own mortality, it would seem natural that self-preservation would certainly be the first reaction. I fear it would be mine. But what I witnessed during those 2 years of his life was a unique ability for my dad to see beyond his own circumstance and to extend compassion to others who too were suffering. One example of that occurred each night when my parents gathered us around their bed to pray. My dad reminded us who to pray for. I still remember their names. Joshua, a child of his friend who is diagnosed with severe autism. Linda, a colleague from his work who was also battling her own cancer diagnosis. And Barney, a 61-year-old dentist from Seattle, and also the first artificial heart transplant recipient. Barney Clark, a stranger, yet a person who is in need of divine help. And so my dad prayed for him, and we prayed for him. And through those prayers, I started to understand a little bit more about what compassion looked and felt like. It was 15 years later when I found myself in a maternity ward in the small town of Moscow, Idaho. My husband was a graduate student, and I was at home with our 2 little girls, waiting for our 3rd to arrive. We had been eager for this baby, but early on we found out that something was not quite right. When she stopped moving in our 8th month of pregnancy, it took all the strength I had to walk into a room that I knew I would eventually have to leave without her. Laying in bed and not quite realizing what I was yet to endure, a nurse came into my room, a stranger, but one full of compassion. She asked me if she could hug me, and she bent down and she hugged me and she kissed my cheek. "This is going to be the hardest day of your life," she said. And then she said, "But I am here with you." She was right. The physical and emotional pain of that day was greater than any I'd experienced in my life. And the grief still comes in and out like waves. But I also look back on that day and I remember this particular act of compassion from someone who didn't even know me, a stranger who shared in my suffering. I don't think it was a coincidence that she was also my nurse when our fourth baby girl came. 16 months later, the shared experience of grief only added to the exquisite joy of that miraculous delivery. Each one of us here has our own stories, which come to us from our own life experiences. Some are full of joy, and others are filled with sorrow. I think most of us have our share of both. But it is what we determine to take from those experiences that become the building blocks of our souls and the core of who and what we become. A nurse who came onto our morning shift, not knowing what she would encounter, but ready to offer her whole heart to a frightened 27-year-old mother. A father of 11 who, when faced with his own mortality, looked beyond his own needs, exercised faith in God, and showed love for those who suffered among him. An ordinary passenger on what was supposed to be an ordinary flight, who in his own critical need made the ultimate sacrifice, saving others' lives at the expense of his own. Each person willingly gave unrequired and undeserved acts of love, without any expectation. But why would they do this? There's no social standard that requires such unselfish acts of service. Instead, it would stand to reason that each had developed empathy through their own life experiences. They may not have even known that the difficult paths that they had walked prior to these events had also taken them to a higher level of humanity. Maybe the rough roads you have walked have taken you there too. Perhaps the value is in our suffering if they equip us with the greatest virtue of all.
Can't see my notes. Hello, my name's Craig Lemire. You must first lay a strong foundation to build a good life. When you build a good foundation, nothing can shake it. My mom was pregnant with me when she was 16 years old. She was told to abort me. She was told to give me up for adoption. She was told she was too young to take care of me. Lucky for me, she listened to her own voice and made her own decision, and she decided to keep me. Lucky for you guys as well, otherwise there would probably be someone far less charming, handsome, and humble talking to you today. A missionary couple serving on the Fort Hall Indian Reservation adopted my mother as a little girl. Due to my mother's mother being ill, the missionaries were in their late 60s when they adopted my mother. As I told you, my mom was young and still trying to find her way in life when I was born. So when I came into the world, a big part of the responsibility of raising me fell upon the shoulders of my grandparents. My grandparents were in their late 70s at that point. My grandmother was a feisty Irish woman named Jane. My grandfather was a proud, hardworking German man named Francis Ezra. More than putting a roof over my head and feeding me, my grandparents gave me so many gifts that would later shape me. Because they lived through the Great Depression and had a commitment to their religion, my grandparents instilled in me a strong moral base and the principles of hard work. They showed me through example unconditional love, support, and encouragement. One thing I always remember about my grandma was this. Her and my grandpa would have discussions, and she would get quite vocal. And at the end, she would always say the same thing. She would always say, "Ezra, I can't help it, I'm Irish." That's the one thing I remember about my grandma. It's safe to say my grandparents poured the first footing of what would become my foundation. I was 10 years old when my grandparents passed. Ralph Waldo Emerson said this: "Life is a succession of lessons which must be lived to be understood." After my grandparents passed, my mom and I really had nowhere to go, so we ended up moving out on the Fort Hall Indian Reservation. You guys remember The Wizard of Oz when it first started, and it's in black and white, then a storm comes, and the house gets all tossed around, and then it finally lands, and when Dorothy comes out, everything's in beautiful Technicolor. Well, Dorothy's experience was pretty much my experience when I moved from my grandparents' house into a housing project on the Fort Hall Indian Reservation. The biggest difference being when Dorothy opened the door, there were nice little munchkins to welcome her, and when I landed on a reservation, there was a bunch of really mean Indians that weren't very nice to me. I think in the first month, I got beat up about 20 times. I had no idea what I was in for when I moved to the reservation, but I quickly found out. To say the least, I did not fit in. When I was dropped off on the reservation with my mom, I was basically just a little white kid with a really good tan. You know, I didn't know anything about that world. When I moved on the reservation, it was not just a cultural change, but it was also an economic and lifestyle 180 for where I came from. You know, when I lived with my grandparents, I wanted for nothing. I went from wanting for nothing to being on church and government subsistence and welfare for our food. I went from wanting nothing to shopping at thrift stores for my school clothes. I went from wanting for nothing to pawning stuff that we owned so we could keep the electricity on. Who remembers food stamps before they were these little Idaho card things? Way back in the day, food stamps came in these little booklets. They look like Monopoly money. And so you go to a store, when you bought food, you'd like rip out the currency and you know, give it to the cashier. How many of you guys remember penny candy? Remember when you could literally go to the store and they had jars of candy? You could buy an individual piece of candy for a single penny. Well, one of the things that we would do when we were really down on our luck was my mom would give each one of us kids one of those $1 food stamps. And we would take it to the store and we would buy a single penny candy. And because they didn't have welfare coins, you would get 99 cents back. And so we would take that 99 cents, and that's how we put gas in the car when things were hard. Oops, sorry. I could literally go on and on about my adventures, good and bad, from the reservation. But I want you to know this from it. The reservation toughened me up and taught me I could compete with anyone. The reservation taught me to fight and believe in myself in spite of fear. The reservation taught me life is hard and cruel at times, but it's also very beautiful. The reservation taught me life is not fair and never will be. But because of that, it's also not a crutch and an excuse for you to fail. Maybe the greatest gift the reservation gave me was allowing me to be educated in, to participate in, and learn to revere my own culture. I can say with surety, as with the lessons from my grandparents, my life would be significantly less if it wasn't for the reservation. David Allan Coe said this: "It's not the beauty of the building you should look at, rather the construction of the foundation. That is what needs to stand the test of time." In closing, I just want to thank a place called the Fort Hall Indian Reservation and thank a feisty Irish woman named Jane and a proud, hardworking German named Francis Ezra for laying the foundation for who I am today.
I made it up here without falling, so I'm doing good. When two brothers left Tennessee, it was a turning point in my family's story, a change in the trajectory of who we are today. They headed west and took the railroad to the end of the line and started walking north, homesteading 7 miles east of Ashton in 1901. The eldest brother, J.A. Atchley, was my great-grandfather. He and his family cleared land out of sagebrush and aspen trees and started the farm. He would plant the crop and then drive stagecoaches through Yellowstone Park while his family stayed home and watched over the crops. Then my grandfather and his brothers farmed, buying the homesteads around them. My mom and dad expanded the farm even further, growing steadily as opportunities arose and building a multi-year production program to ensure the highest quality of seed potatoes. When I was little, my dad called me his shadow, as I was always eager to do things on the farm. I started from the bottom, picking rocks out of fields and trapping gophers. But by the time I was in high school, I operated harvest equipment, drove tractors, and drove trucks during harvest, a job that I still love to do. However, I never really thought that I would run the farm. And maybe it was because I was raised in a conservative area where women didn't do that kind of thing, but I do. And I'm the 4th generation to be here. I do want you to know, though, that there really is something wrong with all of us in my family. My dad calls it a genetic defect. We do it because it's a part of us, it's in our blood, and we just don't want to do anything else. Yet we can't control the weather, or if we even get a crop, we don't even control the prices that we sell it for. There's a lot of risk in farming, and we can mitigate some of the risk with things like crop insurance, irrigation, and technology. But farming keeps you humble. What you think you learned from one year probably won't work the next. And always it takes a little faith that the seeds will grow when they are planted. My grandfather said that you can never stand still on a farm. You're either growing or you're going backwards. Everything must be done with precision and at the right time. It is a business with the balance of crop production, marketing, financial, and employee management. And a big part of my job is to plan days, weeks, and even years ahead. And most of the time, I feel like I just need the batons that they have at the airport to ensure that everything is running smoothly. We're planning for our farm to be around for our future generations, much longer than any of us. We've put conservation easements on part of our farm and rangeland to ensure that it will forever be protected from development. We strive to protect our fields and open spaces that are part of critical migration corridors, wildlife, and bird habitat. And this is all part of our belief that our lives are interconnected to the soils and the ecosystems around us. These days, we are bombarded with catchphrases and labels. Does organic, natural, or non-GMO sound familiar? For me, it's frustrating that a marketing tool vilifies conventional agriculture. Labels infer that those of us who don't choose to be one of them are the bad guys. But if I really thought organic was better, we would do it. And we do care, and we always have. We've learned from those who have come before us from their lifetimes of experience and what works best. Yet we continually learn and challenge ourselves to produce better crops and to try new things and to accomplish our goals. For example, let's talk about insects. Do you know that potatoes catch colds just like we do? For us to raise certified seed, we need to protect our plants from viruses, and aphids are the main vector of transmission of these viruses. Even though they don't like the taste of potato plants, when they fly into a field, they hop from one plant to the next, probing a leaf to see if it tastes better. But with each bite comes a potential instantaneous spread of a virus transmitted into the plant from the insect. And in order to stop these aphids from spreading these viruses, we need to spray pesticides to protect the plant, just as you would in your own gardens. But now with current technology, we have aphid-specific pesticides that do not harm beneficial insects, like bees or ladybugs. There are other projects that have made our farm more sustainable. There's an underground pipeline through one of our fields that begins at an existing canal that generates hydropower. My dad spearheaded putting almost the entire North Fremont Canal system into a pressurized pipeline. And this has not only helped our farm, but all farms in the area to be more efficient. And they will continue to save both power and water. We farmers and ranchers just don't really like to talk about ourselves. And we're really honestly terrible at telling our stories. But if you do ask any of us why we do the things we do, you will probably receive a longer answer than you expected. Because ultimately, all of us want to protect what makes Idaho a great place to live and to raise families. We love to be able to see and hear the sandhill cranes in the spring and watch moose and elk migrating across our fields and rangelands in the fall. And so I'd like to close with a favor to ask all of you. I would ask you, everyone, that you care about farming and ranching and the families that do it, because we can't do this alone. This is just my family's story, but all farms and ranches are working every day to provide safe, quality food. And that I hope what I value from the bottom of my heart, agriculture, will be yours too. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Let's take a break. We'll come back at 1:45, and I'll remind you, restrooms in the back, more beverages, 10 minutes. Please do make your way back to your seats. We'll appreciate it and get our next 4 speakers to the podium. Thank you for your diligent listening. Now part 2 of diligent listening, respectful listening. Park, please join me and take us away for some more listening.
Life is a great teacher, but being a willing student is vital. I grew up in Pocatello, attended public schools there, and following in my dad's footsteps, joined the Navy ROTC program in college. After graduation, the Navy assigned me as damage control officer on a destroyer in the Atlantic Fleet. My job was to make sure we were prepared in case of an incident, and we drilled constantly. I sometimes wondered if all this was necessary. A few months after joining the ship, I found out. We were in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean on our way to NATO exercises when I was awakened by the report that the seal around one of the propeller shafts had failed, and the compartment at the rear end of the ship was flooding. Although it took just a few minutes to get to the affected area, the water was waist-high and rising fast. Within minutes, my team had the flooded compartment sealed and the shaft seal was replaced. They were prepared, and there was no sense of panic. Being prepared and remaining calm in a crisis was an important lesson for me. When my naval career ended, I was hired by a small division of General Motors and spent 13 years with them. For the 5 years I lived in Detroit, the division general manager and I would ride to work together, 35 minutes to and from the GM headquarters building. In addition to learning about his management philosophy and corporate strategy, I had the opportunity to accompany him to some very important and interesting meetings. For years, GM products were designed for power and comfort, not fuel economy. When gas prices tripled in 1973 due to the oil embargoes, GM's business model was destroyed. At a meeting of the general managers to confront the mounting crisis, I was impressed at how quickly they developed strategies to stem the rapid sales decline. There was no despair or finger pointing, just total focus on the fix. I came away from that meeting understanding leaders work on solutions and are not intimidated by problems. That's another important lesson for me. I love my job, but one day I received a call from my dad. We talked about my upcoming reassignment to GM, which meant we'd be moving again. He said, "Son, you have a great career at GM, but it's time for me to retire. I need to know whether you want to come back to Idaho to run the family auto business or continue with GM. If you stay with GM, you'll be a small fish in a big pond. If you come home, you can be a bigger fish in a smaller pond." In the end, the opportunity to make a difference, to be part of a solution, was compelling. So we returned to Pocatello in 1979. It didn't take long for the first opportunity to emerge. A large plant manufacturing mining equipment closed in Pocatello. Within a year, the city had lost 10% of its workforce. The community was not prepared for a crisis like this, and there was a bit of panic developing. Calling on my GM experience, I helped assemble a small group to work on a strategy. A survey of the available facilities in Pocatello was completed, and it turned out that the closed manufacturing plant had a large vacant administrative building. One of my friends was an FBI agent who told me the FBI was looking for a location in the West for a data center. Over time, and with close cooperation from our congressional delegation, that building is now the second FBI data center. It currently employs around 400 people and is looking to hire 350 more. As you can tell, life has taught me that challenges are really opportunities in disguise. During my time as CEO of Bank of Idaho, I served as the director of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. At the board meeting, the Fed staff expressed concern about the low percentage of high school graduates who continue their education beyond high school. They knew the economic growth in the West couldn't reach its potential without an educated workforce. The Fed proposed either Seattle or Los Angeles as the place to pilot the program to improve the go-on rate. To me, this was a great opportunity for Idaho, so I suggested they run the trial here. We have the same problem. Our state's go-on rate is 38%, and small school districts are perfect for projects like this. The suggestion was adopted, and Idaho Falls is just completing its first year of the program we call Within Reach. For the pilot, 5 Idaho Falls firms were selected. The focus was on employees in those firms who did not go on beyond high school themselves and who had children in grades 8 through 12. The program helps students understand the career choices available and the education they will need to get good jobs of today and tomorrow. The Fed has a research team overseeing this pilot, and they tell me the online resources available for Idahoans is the best they have seen in 9 western states. In addition, thanks to the governor's launch program, there's an excellent tuition support available through the state of Idaho. According to their research, the critical factor as to whether an Idaho student continues education beyond high school is the support and encouragement of parents. So parents in the room, that's another way you can make a huge difference. This brings me back to my earlier conversation with my dad. Was he right? Was I able to make more of a difference in a smaller community? I hope so. I wish I could pick up the phone to thank him for his advice. I'd tell him about the plaque on my desk that says it all. My father gave me the greatest gift anyone could give. He believed in me. And most of all, he believed I could make a difference.
I am Sabrina Lyons. I'm a wife, a daughter, a friend, and a child of the Most High God. As a little girl, growing up an only child in Hampton, Virginia, I had a lot of time to think about and ponder things. I would sit contently alone in my bedroom, making little drawings using colored pencils. I would carefully design on paper characters who were talking with each other. I would use the little thought bubbles that came from each of their mouths that contained information about the importance of health-sustaining behaviors. My drawings became the decor on the walls in my bedroom. Later in my childhood, I experienced the unexpected loss of an auntie, a tragedy that had profound influence on my perspectives on health behaviors and the resulting outcomes. This consistently evolved into what is important to me and why. This realization, there is a realization that is always at play for me. I recognize that there was indeed a time when things I could take for granted were the very things that others before me had to fight for. In some cases, the fight was to no avail. I value the ability to choose where I want to live, where I want to vacation, where I want to recreate. The opportunities that I have been afforded have a foundation in what I hold dear, based on my hard work, dedication, and commitment. I get to work in a profession where I can influence and encourage safe behaviors in others. I don't have to be concerned about the food and water I consume. I have the blessings of family, friends, my husband, and my dogs, Pumpkin and Piper. Getting to live in what is considered a luxury by those in other parts of the world who are more than less fortunate. I value not having to be concerned with everyday safety in terms of living in a country that is not ravished by war. Having a mindset that defaults to making decisions that have the best intentions. Compassion for others and their needs. The fact that I was raised in a manner that did not impose prejudices and hatred upon people who are different from me. The religious freedoms allow me to trust in God without a threat to my overall well-being. I value the fact that I was born during a time when there are technological advancements that have enhanced life in so many ways. In some ways, I am proud of the fact that I am fearless when it comes to facing life's challenges. Treating people with integrity, dignity, and respect in every interaction and every decision is unwavering. The thoughts and pondering I would do as a young child consequently became what I think of now as a promoter of humanity and the health and well-being of others. I decided I would become an advocate for all things keeping people healthy. One of my first campaigns as a young child was to encourage people to abstain from smoking. Fast forward to adulthood, and I ended up moving across the country to Idaho with my husband for his job at the Naval Reactor Facility. Life in Idaho is where I consistently built upon my appreciation for many things regarding human life, including my own. I get to invest in my ability to care about the health and well-being of others intently and purposefully. Compassion, I get to put compassion into deliberate action. And that has been a consistent theme in my life. This resulted in becoming a licensed registered nurse and a career in health and safety at the Idaho National Lab, a government subcontractor. Living in Idaho Falls has been part of the greatest challenges and greatest blessings. I don't get to blend in with the crowd. And frankly, as it is stated in Psalm 139, verse 14, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And frankly, this God-given packaging comes with many assumptions, stereotypes, and misjudgments. For example, walking into a setting and the room goes silent. Those are the challenges. The blessings are the fact that prolific racism in Idaho Falls against Black people, for the most part, is the exception and not the rule. There are also countless blessings related to experiencing a life filled with purpose. My ambitions in early childhood were manifested in the life choices I eventually made for myself. I believe a turning point for me was that profound loss of my auntie, to whom I was very close to. She suffered a stroke because of her lifestyle choices, and there was nothing that could be done for her. It took me some time to come to grips with that as a reality. So I made a personal commitment to do what I could to help other people through my work as an RN and as a safety and health professional. Although challenges, they come and they go, I recognize that my auntie and others in my bloodline don't get to enjoy many of the life's treasures and freedoms. I get to purposely experience a fulfilling life in their honor. It seems that my early childhood aspirations have come full circle. In fact, I own a sweatshirt that sums it all up perfectly. And that sweatshirt reads, "I'm busy making my ancestors proud."
Hello, my name is Jackson Taylor. I was born down the road at Ermac and spent the rest of my adolescence in Idaho Falls. I was raised in a devout family that belonged to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I spent all of my 4 high school summers as a lifeguard and swim teacher at the City of Ammon swimming pool. Each 4th of July, my entire extended family attends the Idaho Falls Parade in the morning, and then the Melaleuca Fireworks Festival in the evening. I attended Bonneville High School, where I was a member of the school's 3-time state champion competitive cheer team. Go Bees. After I graduated from Bonneville in the spring of 2020, I moved to California to study molecular and cellular neurobiology at UC Berkeley. I always felt a little different from other boys my age. And in middle school, I had a good idea what might be wrong. Because of the things I had heard at church and by my peers, being gay was not an option. I became overwhelmed by shame. I wrote in my private journal, "If God won't love me enough to make me straight, I will commit suicide by the end of the month." I wanted to get rid of this part of me before anyone guessed my secret. I believed that if people found out, they would hate me I spent a little over 2 years in this constant state of fear, convinced that my life had no value. I was not the only person who couldn't see how valuable their life was. In my sophomore year, in the span of 6 months, 6 boys in my high school had died by suicide because they believed that their life had no value. I remember attending the candlelit vigils for each of the boys, surrounded on all sides by my peers as we stood mourning the precious life of our friends, family members, and loved ones. I would drive home from these ceremonies and fall into my bed, my body aching from the physical pain elicited by my own realization that I was prepared to die next. It wasn't until I told my parents that I was gay and received their unconditional love and acceptance that I could begin my own journey to recognize the value of my own life. My wonderful parents made it clear that they will always love me and support me, independent of being born gay. They also told me that there is nothing that I can do or say that will affect their love. In short, they do not love me despite my identity. They love me because of my identity. I did not know any other LGBTQ plus kids in Idaho Falls. My mom found a group in Utah that was holding a 3-day gathering for gay youth. The event would hopefully provide that necessary sense of belonging I had been missing for years. As the day grew closer, I grew anxious about the event. Questions like these filled my head. What were these kids going to be like? Would I arrive to a room full of people wearing rainbow unicorn costumes? These uncertainties surged inside me as my older sister drove me in the passenger seat in dead silence for the 3-hour drive to Bountiful, Utah. The unending dull noise created by the car driving along I-15 was deafening. When we arrived, my sister dropped me off at the large brick building they were meeting at. As I walked in, I saw kids absorbed in their crafts, playing ping pong in one corner, board games in another. A few minutes later, all 40 of us sat on chairs in a large circle to play a get-to-know-you game. That day, I got to know every kid there. I was amazed that there were other kids that had gone through the same painful experiences that I had. And importantly, I was able to see kids that were at many different stages of coming to terms with who they are. I met someone from Payson, Utah, that previously really struggled understanding the value of his life. But by the time I met him, he had found comfort and happiness in his sexual orientation. As the activities progressed, my fear of meeting other gay kids faded. They dressed in the same jeans as all the other kids in my high school did, and they didn't wear rainbow unicorn costumes. At the end of the 3 days full of activities and creating new lifelong friendships, all of us sat side by side in our big circle for the last time. We were invited to share our experiences with the group and leave each other with a message of hope or advice for our friends that had to return to a more painful reality. As I listened to my new friends, I looked around the room at the faces of all my friends. I looked at a girl who is an amazing singer. She knew exactly how to make everyone feel included in a conversation. I looked at another kid who went to high school in Twin Falls, and she had a soccer tournament to get to when she returned home. With each person I saw, a feeling of warmth spread through my body, and very suddenly, I had an overwhelming feeling of love. Very clearly, these words came to me almost as if someone spoke them aloud. I love each and every one of these kids so much, and they have so much inherent value. If I know that each of their lives have so much value, that means my life must also have that same inherent value. You know, this sounds like a great realization, But if you noticed, in this moment of epiphany, I did not say that I love myself. I said I could finally see my life had value. It took me many difficult years after this moment to learn to love my identity. Through the love and support from all the members of my large family, my closest friends, and an amazing therapist here in Idaho Falls, I was able to start and survive my journey that led me to love myself. It wasn't easy, and there were some very dark and painful times that followed. But with the help of my support system, I was able to live through it and thrive. I would like to share with you some meaningful data about LGBTQ plus youth suicide compiled by the Trevor Project. LGBTQ youth are more than 4 times as likely to attempt suicide than their peers. 45% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year, including more than half of transgender and non-binary youth. Finally, and probably the most important for you guys to remember, having at least one accepting adult can reduce the risk of a suicide attempt among LGBTQ youth by 40%.
I left work one dark, cold, snowy December evening in 2003. My husband had been in Iraq then for nearly a year with his National Guard unit. I heard from him only sporadically and watched the news to glean clues to his safety. The fear of an unexpected knock at the door or a government car parked in front of my house never left me. My 2 sons and my dad and his wife were far away serving church missions, and my mother had died 5 years earlier. In what seemed like an instant, our bustling family home, full of family and friends, was reduced to 2, me and my 14-year-old daughter. Responsibility for her and for our far-flung family weighed heavily on me, especially without my husband by my side. My usual excitement for Christmas was missing. I turned the corner to our house and was astonished to see Christmas lights. Our dear 86-year-old neighbor, Todd Ogala, had risked his life and limbs to climb up and down the ladder and on and off the roof to bring us some Christmas cheer. Todd and his wife, Ida Ogala, had been quietly propping us up, not just for the previous hard year, but since we had moved in some years before. Todd would slip into the house after we had all left for the day and take our dog for a walk. He taught me how to trim and care for my rose bushes, and my husband how to grow the best tomatoes ever. Ida baked and canned and shared her clothesline and her goodies. Todd would slip our kids a little cash before they went on a school field trip or on a vacation. We spent so many happy summer evenings on Todd and Ida's porch, checking in with each other and eating watermelon. Todd and Ida have now passed away, but the gifts they gave us never will. Even before Todd and Ida taught me so much, I had been taught to serve others. My parents chose a path of faith for their young family. I was taught to mourn with those who mourn, to comfort those who stand in need of comfort, and to use any gifts I had been given to love and serve others. I remember when my dad, after owning many different Chevys, came home with a beautiful Cadillac. My mother was horrified and was embarrassed to drive the thing because it was so ostentatious. But when one of my father's high school friends admired the car, my father offered to let him drive it. he handed the keys over to his friend and his wife for a weekend trip to Salt Lake City. One of the very few times I ever saw my father angry helped me understand what he believed about the great Christian imperative to love one another. He had been helping a Native American couple new to the area find a place to live. He went with them to look at an apartment when they showed up and the landlord suddenly didn't have an apartment available anymore. This was in the mid-'70s and my father was furious. They eventually did find housing. Another time, my dad, wanting to show some confidence in some teenagers he was teaching at church who had a common interest with him in cars, gave them a key to his auto parts store so that they could go in after hours and get parts on the honor system. Years later, one of the boys told me that they had betrayed my father's trust and stolen the parts rather than pay for them. One of them did eventually confess to my father, but my father never told any of us about this, and he continued to help and support the boys. Choosing to truly love our neighbor comes at a price. Our dear Todd and Ida Ogawa knew this. First-generation Japanese Americans, they were raised in southeast Idaho in productive families that contributed to their community. But when Pearl Harbor was bombed, this was forgotten. FBI agents raided the homes of Japanese Americans, including Todd's family, and destroyed all their Japanese items. Japanese Americans in this community were asked not to return to the churches they had attended. Remnants of prejudice followed Todd and Ida throughout their lives. Todd and Ida and many of their fellow Japanese Americans made a choice to love and serve in the face of ridicule and suspicion and prejudice. They did this through the Japanese American Citizens League and through countless acts of service, not just to my family, but to neighbors and friends and communities wherever they were. This was a heroic choice. Our world right now feels troubled and even dangerous. Life can be and is hard and unforgiving. We're all searching for ways that we can feel safe and secure. I have been protected and cared for so many times by my communities in so many ways. I've been trusted enough to serve in these communities. I feel protected and carried and forgiven and strong and generous in my communities. As we each live and love and serve and forgive and try to understand each other, we weave a strong and tight fabric of community. My children have all gone on to create their own communities that from time to time we are fortunate enough to participate in. We recently shared our Easter dinner with Todd and Ida's daughter and son-in-law who are here tonight, and with some of our own children and grandchildren. Just within our immediate family, the ties of community stretch across the country and through time, both past and future. My husband and his strength create the core of my most personal community. Together we throw a wide open Christmas party. Some of you have been there. We invite everyone we know. Anybody I know that I run into in the weeks preceding the party gets an invitation. The real pleasure of the party is seeing people light up with recognition at their friends, seeing their friends in an unexpected place. We hear, "How do you know the Mallards?" And people say, "I didn't know he was your brother." And sometimes there's even a, "You invited him?" thrown in. There is warmth and light and laughter and joy. What I value is the people I love and the communities I treasure. When the dark, cold nights come, as they will again, and as they do for all of us, I feel confident that the fabric of love and service that we weave together, choice by choice and moment by moment, can shelter and protect us all.
Thank you for your reverent listening. Thanks to our speakers for their reverent speaking. And I think Greg Carr said it best in the video that this evening, this project is about weaving us together into a fabric of friendship. I have two thank yous before dinner starts. First, Nancy Buffington. Could you stand up and wave? Nancy, you can hear the speakers clapping. Nancy is a former professor of English and a professional coach for our speakers. The content, the words are our speakers' own, but she has the ability to help support them through this journey. We don't just ask people to say, hey, what do you value and why? We actually want to support them through it. So Nancy is a big part, well, she's a huge part of that. The other thing I'd like to do is bring the speakers up to the stage. So please, come on up. It's a long walk. So be as loud as you want as we thank them for Idaho Listen. And thank you all. Enjoy yourselves. Refreshments, dinner, conversation, and get to know one another if you don't already. So thank you again. This has been a wonderful experience, and we have dinner coming out as I speak. Thanks again.